Hello everyone and welcome to another Raid Shadow Legends video. It's Andy and today we have an exciting one. We have some information on the new faction in Raid Shadow Legends. That's right, we have the Shadowkin. So today on the Facebook page for Raid Shadow Legends they have announced that patch 3.4 I think it is coming, and they have announced that with that patch, which we're expecting on around the 15th of March, if not before, they're going to be releasing the first wave of Shadowkin heroes and champions. So, Shadowkin champions, who have they announced? Who is coming in the patch 3.4, which is absolutely imminent? Let's take a look. Genzin. Genzin is the first legendary champion named on this list. Spirit affinity, attack type champion, so hopefully he's going to deal some serious damage. And then the kit is pretty unique. I've not seen anyone who does what this guy, or certainly what I expect this guy to do, as well as he does it. So we have on the A1, attacks one enemy 3 times. Each hit fills this champion's turn meter by 6%. Now, we have champions who have a steel turn meter on the A1. We have champions who reduce turn meter by a given percentage on the A1. Armiger, for example, who's an uncommon champion, he can reduce the turn meter by 30% on his A1, which is massive. You know, it's clearly bigger than 6%, but read this carefully. Attacks one enemy 3 times each hit. So for each of those 3 hits, this guy is going to gain 6% turn meter. So that's 18% turn meter on the A1. That's pretty sizable. By comparison, we've got champions like Yorg the Hermit. He does a 20%, I think it is, increased turn meter, which is a 3-turn cooldown. It does increase attack by 50% at the same time, but it's still a 3-turn cooldown. We have Deacon Judge, or Deacon Armstrong even, Deacon Armstrong, who does a 15% increase and a 15% reduction, and he can do that every other turn. So that's very strong as well. But this is the A1, so every turn it's 3 times, so you're immediately thinking he could be good for champions, for bosses, sorry. He could be good for bosses, such as the Fire Knight. And with it being an increased turn meter as opposed to a decreased turn meter, you're not worried about bosses like the Dragon, where decreasing the turn meter isn't possible. And you're also not worried about accuracy. Certainly not at this stage anyway, because you don't need the accuracy to increase your own turn meter. So, the A2, Steel Parting. And I'm very excited about this champion, guys. If I get a chance to pull him, I'm actually hoping there's going to be some sort of event to increase your chances of getting these new faction heroes. So the Shadowkin heroes, I'm hoping that we get a big boost to our shards so that we get a better chance at people like Genzin. So carrying on, A2. Attacks all enemies, always nice. Has a 75% chance of placing a 60% decreased defense. As you know, decreased defense is one of the best debuffs in the game, especially when it's on an AoE. So that's fantastic there, and obviously you would need the accuracy if you want to use him for that ability. It does book up to a 100% chance to place that on the AoE as well, by the way. Places that debuff for 2 turns, and each critical hit fills this champion's turn meter by 10%. Now, the way that's worded, each critical hit, makes me think of someone like Shield Guard, who, if you use Shield Guard, another uncommon here, shout out to the uncommons today, His A2 gives him an increase to his turn meter every time he gets a critical hit with his AoE ability. And on the spider, and I'm really thinking about the spider for this guy, on the spider, he is able, if you put him in a reflex set, bringing that 2-turn cooldown to a 1-turn cooldown if you're lucky, Shield Guard can pump out some massive damage on the spiderlings. Obviously, spiderling damage, be aware if you're going to build this guy to try and take on the spider. After, say, wave 15, it becomes more about turn meter control than it does about spiderling damage. But this guy may be able to deal with both. So he'd be able to take another turn very quickly if he gets a crit on all of those spiderlings. You think there's 10 of them up or something like that at any given time. He could essentially fill his turn meter on the A2 immediately, thus giving himself another turn. So that could be very nice. The A3 attacks one enemy, will ignore unkillable buffs and shield buffs, fills this champion's turn meter by 30%, fills this champion's turn meter by 60% instead if the target has 50% HP or less after this attack. Also decreases the cooldown of the Steel Parting and Fated Vengeance skills by 1 turn if this attack kills an enemy. And again, that looks like it bucks down to a 3-turn cooldown. So if we're working on the spider, or any other boss for that matter, and you're getting them down to that 50% marker, this guy's going to be getting 60% of his turn meter filled up every time he uses Fated Vengeance. If you do combine him with someone like Deacon Armstrong, who can give him another 15% turn meter every other turn, you're basically taking another turn 1 in 3 times. And with the additional 18% turn meter he can get from the A1 and the additional 10 to maybe even 100% turn meter that he can get from the A2, depending what boss you're doing and what stage you're at, this guy could be going a lot of times and he could be doing a lot of damage depending on how hard he hits. But by way of comparison, Deacon Armstrong, who is my most recently built hero, Deacon Armstrong can do some serious damage to bosses like the spider purely because he goes with his AoE ability so often. He does it every other turn because he goes twice with his Grant Extra turn on his A3, and he increases turn meter and decreases the opponent's turn meter. So he's going so frequently that even though he's not hitting as hard as some of my other champions like Zargala, he's just pumping that damage out. And it's the same principle as Shield Guard, who is also in my team. And Shield Guard, he's not as strong as Zargala, but because he can go so many times in that reflex set, he's doing so much more damage than she ever could. So Genzin very much taking those principles and I think amplifying them again and making him probably one of the best in the game for quick turnover of abilities. So to finish off reading this A3, also decreases the cooldown of the Steel Parting, so that's his A2, and Fated Vengeance skills, so that's this ability, by 1 turn if this attack kills an enemy. Now, wow, if you're doing the spider, odds are he's going to kill an enemy most times he uses that ability, especially if it hits hard enough. And especially with the level of AoE damage this guy could potentially be putting out. So these abilities, especially if you were to put him in a reflex set, let's say, like I've done to my Shield Guard, he could be going every turn or every other turn with these big heavy hitters and increasing his turn meter at the same time. It's scary to think about. It's Shield Guard on steroids, and Shield Guard was already way better than an uncommon. So really excited for that, and he's even got a passive. You know, those 3 abilities on their own was not enough for this guy. He's got his passive in there, increases this champion's speed by 10 and resistance by 50 if there are fewer champions on this champion's team than the number of enemies on the enemy team. But here's the real important bit of that passive. This effect always works when fighting bosses. Wow. So this champion is instantly faster by 10 and has a resistance increase of 50 whenever it's fighting a boss. They are basically telling you this guy is going to be a serious part of your future boss teams. And bear in mind, they're releasing this guy at the same time that they're releasing an extra 5 waves of all of the dungeons. I don't think that's a coincidence. I expect this guy to be top tier for pretty much all the dungeons, and I'd be amazed when he is actually released if his multipliers and everything else are not scarily good. Obviously, this is just my take from reading up on what they've released about him to date, but that's my expectation, so I'm really excited about that one, guys. Yoshi the Drunkard. Now I believe this is the champion that's going to be in the Fragment or Fusion Summon event. So a free champion essentially if you can do the tournaments to the level required and get him. I'm sure there will be loads of guides on how to work the tournaments in your favour to make sure you get Yoshi the Drunkard. Start with the aura because it's ally speed in all battles by 19%. That's a great aura. It's the same aura that Deacon Armstrong has, who's a champion that's just been released and is very hyped. You know, everybody's excited about Deacon Armstrong, and rightly so. He's a beast. And the aura is certainly part of that, and you can see there that Yoshi the Drunkard is bringing exactly the same aura to the table. So that's a strong start for him. We'll go with the A1 next, Strong Booze. So sticking with that drunkard image, attacks one enemy, has a 30% chance of placing a stun debuff for 1 turn. Now, any attack that is single target but has a chance, and it books up to 40% at most to place the stun debuff, I'm not too excited about. I'm sure it will be very useful, especially maybe in arena, but it's not something that's going to ever get me excited with a low percentage chance of working and only a single target. Flaming Spirit attacks 2 times at random, has a 75% chance of placing a 50% decrease accuracy debuff. Not a debuff that I'm too excited about. Again, it's if I could swap Duck the Pierced's accuracy decrease for his contemporary Stag Knight's decreased speed, I'd do it in a heartbeat. But still, it's better to have that than nothing. And more importantly on this A2, it's a HP burn debuff for 2 turns, and that books up to 100% chance. I'm not sure there's many champions in the game that can attack 2 times with a 100% chance of placing HP burn. So that could be pretty nice. Again, you know, your clan bosses, your spiders, things like that. Any boss really where HP burn can be very useful. Battle Toast. So this is presumably when he's got the hangover the next morning and he's trying to get some solids in his stomach to make the spinning stop. Places a 50% increased attack buff on all allies for 2 turns. Now that's very nice. I like that because it may help you with the building of your champions. It books down to a 3-turn cooldown. So you can essentially keep increased accuracy up most of the time. It may free up some of those gear slots so that you can work slightly different compositions in your teams than you were doing already. Also has a 50% chance of placing a True Fear debuff on all enemies for 1 turn. Has a 75% chance instead on enemies under increased attack buffs. So I'm not going to pay too much attention on the increased chance of placing that True Fear, because it's very situational. It requires the enemy to have increased attack as well. I'm sure there will be many examples where that will apply and will work very well, but just speaking in general terms, there's a 50% chance of placing a True Fear debuff on all enemies for 1 turn. That in itself is a great ability. So buffs himself and all allies for 2 turns, and has a chance of controlling the enemy team. So this guy, I'm very much thinking arena. Maybe he can do some sort of a job on the rounds leading up to bosses as well, but that's not what I would be thinking with this champion. I'm thinking of this guy as an arena control champion, which could be very interesting. And then the passive is fills this champion's turn meter by 4% each time an enemy receives a buff. So again, it's very situational. It requires your enemy teams to be putting lots of buffs on, and again, that's something that happens a lot in arena. If you get a team that puts on 16, 17 buffs across all 4 of their champions in a round, this guy's probably going to get another turn. You know, that's 16 times 40, 56% or more. So yeah, interesting champion. It's gonna be the free champion, so it's not surprising that he's not too exciting. But Astralon, if you watched my video on Astralon, he was a free champion as well. I made it clear in that video that I felt that Astralon was going to be very specific to the arena, and that seems to be the case. What I didn't appreciate is just how much of a beast he is in the arena. He really hits hard, and with the kit that he's got, he's just an exceptional arena champion. So perhaps Yoshi the Drunkard will be something similar. I'm not as excited about this guy as I was for Genzin. Jintoro, so magic affinity now. Yoshi was the force affinity, so we've got the trilogy. Again, it's an attack type champion, and he's got a long list of abilities. He's got the aura, he's got the passive, and he's got the 3. So let's start off with the aura again. Increases ally attack in all battles by 29%. That's a solid ability. It's not as strong as some other aura abilities that does the same thing, but it's solid. It's not something I'm too excited about, but it's solid. Soul Drinker attacks 1 enemy, grants an extra turn if this attack kills an enemy. If he hits hard enough, you know, that's similar to Relic Keeper or Hoarding. You will have seen those in the arena. If they're built correctly, they can have great applications in the early to mid game. Maybe as a legendary champion, Jintoro will hit hard enough to make him Relic Keeper after he's been in training for a few years, and he comes up and he can do gold tier and platinum tier. Depends how hard he hits as to whether that's a good ability or not, but if it is going to be a good ability, odds are it's going to be a good ability in the arena again. So, Blood Freeze attacks 1 enemy, steals 100% of the target's turn meter. Again, you know, I can't think of anything better for the arena. Decreases the cooldown of Oni's Rage by 1 turn if the target is immune to turn meter reduction effects. So, turn meter reduction, of course, that's always nice for bosses, and it can be on a 3-turn cooldown as well, which is awesome. I think that's comparable to Heartseeker's. I'll get this right eventually, guys. Cold Heart's Heartseeker ability. There you go. I got there in the end. So 100% steel, and that addition there, just to make him viable for the dragon, let's say, because the dragon is the main thing I think about when I think turn meter can't be reduced. Decreases the cooldown of Oni's Rage by 1 turn if the target is immune to turn meter reduction effects. So that's going to be helping you cycle Oni's Rage, his A3, his big A3, on the dragon every 2 turns really once it's booked. So that could be exciting. And again, anything that steals 100% of the target's turn meter, and it does say steal there, not reduce. So presumably this guy gets 100% of the target's turn meter and could potentially be going again. You know, this could essentially pan out as an extra turn ability if it triggers correctly. Could be very exciting there. So Oni's Rage, because that ability, how good it is going to depend on how good Oni's Rage is. Attacks one enemy, places a 60% decreased defense debuff and a 25% weakened debuff for 2 turns. Amazing for bosses. You know, when you're onto the bosses, you want those single target decreased defense and weaken, or rather, it doesn't matter if it's single target or AoE, but you want those debuffs, and because it's on the boss, it doesn't really matter that it's single target, except for on the frost column, of course. So, attacks one enemy, places those debuffs, will attack 5 times instead of 1 on every 4th use of this skill against the same target in 1 round. So that is for bosses. That's built for bosses. Absolutely 100%. Because if you are cycling this on a 2-turn cooldown, let's say, with the help of Blood Freeze and being a 3-turn cooldown when booked anyway, maybe you put a reflex set on this guy too. If you're cycling this enough, he's going to hit 5 times instead of 1. That's 5 times the damage. That's bigger than any multiplier in the game, as far as I'm aware. This guy could be a solution, especially in Doom Tower bosses, where those damage based on enemy HP have just been capped. This guy may end up being the biggest hitter in those scenarios, depending on his multipliers and how he works, but that's what I would be expecting from that kit. And the passive all turn meter fill effects are increased by 50% when used on this champion. So again, trying to help you cycle through those abilities so you get Oni's Rage working again and again. If you couple him with someone like Deacon Armstrong, Seeker, anyone who's going to increase the turn meter, Old Hermit York, it's going to increase his turn meter even faster than it normally would do, and this guy could be very strong. I'd definitely be looking at coupling this guy with Deacon Armstrong, maybe a Seeker, and just getting this guy running that Oni's Rage again and again. If he hits hard enough, he could be the only damage dealer you need, especially since he applies those debuffs, decreased defense and weaken, on his own. Scary champion for bosses. And the extra turn there, I did say it was something that I'd be looking at more for arena, but actually with the rest of his kit, that could just be a nice bonus for you in the waves. So really exciting champion, Jintoro, as well. Hi guys, so thanks for watching the video. I hope you enjoyed it. I'm going to end it there for now, just so that we can focus primarily on the legendary champions that are being released, so that the video doesn't run too long. I do have some content where I've discussed the abilities and the interest that I have in the epic, rare and uncommon champions that have been released in the same patch, and I'll do a subsequent video on that in the near future. But for now, as I say, I hope you enjoyed it. If you could leave a like, if you could subscribe, and if you have any ideas or any thoughts or feedback, if you could leave a comment as well, it's all greatly appreciated. So thanks for watching and take care.